Alrighty, so nothingness. It's a bit of a weird concept. Um, Especially since it's like, oh, it's in relation to these things, and so therefore there's the absence of more of this stuff that's us or the quantum foam or even potential. And it's like, well, yeah, no, but no. And then I was thinking about thermal and momentum and all this other stuff, because it's like, well, it's the movement of something that gives you potential with the fields that are there, quantum fields, that effectively allow for something. And what is it? What is the thing that does the field thing? It's like it's connected, right? It's like, yeah. See what I'm saying? See what I'm saying? You know, it's like, right, yeah. So it's like, okay. Right, and then it's like, it's the absence of all these other things. That, it just looks like nothing, but of course, you know, it always would eventually be nothing. It's an infinite nothing, you know what I mean? So, anyways, it's like, well, that's you. Yeah, no. For me, it's a little different. It's a trick, like an optical illusion to a degree. It's like, no. It's literally nothing. You see what I'm saying? It's like literally its static point fix is true, absolute, not there, of any, devoid of all of it. Right. Not because there's other stuff around, and if you work really hard, you'd find a little something. But it's like the way I describe it is like it can always go infinite, but that's the point of an infinity. You know what I mean? And that's the point of like, well, it's technicality wise, really isn't. That's the point of the work. Like you can keep working your butt off to get to a point of absolute that, but then now you're there. You see what I'm saying? Which means you're not nothing. The nothing moved. You know what I mean? And it's also why the technicality is a technicality. It's like you can do whatever you fucking damn well please, you'll never get to it. You know what I mean? Doesn't matter how hard you go. You can do an infinite and it will not get you there. Because, well, of course, you just turn into the thing. Instead of the absence of stuff around it, it's not that at all. You know, but you'll see it because there's an absence of a bunch of shit around. You know what I mean? Like, there's a bunch of shit around, there's an absence. You know what I mean? But it's like, that's not what you would do, right? Right, yeah. You can indirectly observe it. You cannot ever interact. There's no interactions, there's no interference, there's no anything. The only indirect way is to view. Okay? Which is like, you have a whole bunch of shit, and there's not a thing there. Really hyper defines itself. But that's only because you looked at all of these other things, and that was not there. But it's not going to show up with something. It's not. And it still has an impact on the things around it because of the absence of it. Okay? It's space slash a pull slash a push slash movement. But it's like, well, that's where it came down to the start. There wasn't anything. It's like, yes, because it now is the thing. But on a technicality, it can never get to itself. You see what I'm saying? It's like, it is what it is. Okay? Now, in relation to other things, there isn't. It's just itself. But it doesn't matter to itself. It infinitely goes on. Which means there's movement for itself to move around inside of. It will never go there. It will never be able to do it. There isn't anything moving, really. But it doesn't matter. That's the point of an infinity. You guys basically miss it every time. Like my conceptual ability is missing. It's like, that doesn't work, and blah, 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 and you're relating it to a bunch of things that don't matter, that aren't the case, that in every way aren't, in any capacity, shape, or form, this. It's counterintuitive to what you usually see on a day-to-day basis. That's the point I'm trying to get across to you. Jeez! There's no fields, there's no fucking points, there's no anything. It's an infinite nothing. But it's not. But it is, on a technicality. Nothingness means infinity goes into itself. You know what I mean? It's a thing. That's what it will do. That's always what it will do. But that means movement. How does movement work with that? God, fucking shit. Why don't you understand the concept of infinity? You stupid, dumb, smooth brain. I'm laughing because it's like, truthfully, you're not like bad or dumb. Alright, these are really, really hard concepts for even very smart people to get often. Okay? It's like, why does it go into itself? There's nothing, because you're imagining an outside point of it. There isn't. There's no outside. The outside is inside of the infinite. That's how that works. But it's on a technicality that it even exists. It's like, on a technicality, I technically am technically. Do I need to say this word enough? How many times do I need to say this? Technicality. It doesn't. It's not. But it, for those situations, acts as if it is and will be doing that as an infinite. Which means, for these things, it looks, seems, is all these infinities, and then therefore potentials are gained. It's really simple concepts for me, because I've been looking and working on them for a really long time. So it's like, you know what I mean? These are really simple for me. But other people, it's like, that doesn't make... And it's like so profound and blah, and it's like, it's just a... It's the problem I have with people sometimes. And it's like, the math doesn't work the way you think it does. And I'm like, who said anything about math? Who's this commenter? Who are you, you fucking idiot? Why don't you let me finish before you even try and open your little stupid smooth brain mouth? An asshole. Ugh. Moving on. Because I have to. Because you need to let me explain this commenter. We've already dilly-dallied for like fucking 5 minutes dealing with you after I said a few fucking sentences and then you got all upset. Now, how does work this? Basically, right? Smooth brains, we're here. I'm one of you. Or I'm going to try and pretend. Let's describe what a technicality is. It means it is doing this thing, but only in a very narrow, very specific type of perspective, and that's it. Outside of all other things, it's doing that. That's what a technicality means. Did you understand it now? It's not, it's nothingness, it's not infinite, it's none of those things, but because of the way it works, it means it does that. It's the physics of a nothingness. Those are the physics of how a nothingness runs. Counterintuitive to your solid shit, doesn't do anything like that. It's not connected. It's only as a result of things around it that you'll probably see it. And to itself, there isn't a stop point. But it never wants to exist because, well, golly gee, kinda wanna have a fucking, not nothingness thing going on, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's one of those, like, a good way to describe its physics in terms of, like, turning it into more, anthropomorphic or something, right? Where it's like, it's more of a, you can relate it as a human concept. It's like, well, first off, I'm an infinite nothing, and I have all of this fucking potential to do all these things. I can't do nothing at all, literally in any way, because I'm nothing, except for one thing, which is to fill my ass up however the hell I can. That's it. Literally, I need this filled. That's it. That's all I can do. That's it. I have nothing but the ability to move things and fucking put them together and then try and fill it up. That's it. It's like, well, you're nothingness. So how does nothingness move a not there thing? And it's like, well, if you move things that are not there really well on a technicality, they became there. And a good way to describe that is constructive-destructive interference for itself. I learned the word, it works. It's still interactive forces to me, but they're not really interacting. It's still nothing, but then nothing can interact with itself, and you can always infinitely get more, less, on a technicality. On a technicality. That's how that works. But it's also really technical there. For anyone out there that doesn't really understand that, it's not really even doing anything. You see, that's why Potential Land comes in. It moved something of itself. But you wouldn't know that, but it's an infinite fucking nothing. And so as a result, that thing that's moving does suddenly see itself moving, even though it's not, really, realistically. It's a real hard concept to follow. It's not an easy one. I make it sound easy by saying words that make it easier to understand. Because it's like, what you just said literally doesn't work, and that doesn't happen. And it's like, no, that's exactly what's happening. That's the point. That's the point I'm trying to make. It's like, there's space for it to go into, even though the space is not even there, because it's nothing. See what I'm saying? It's like, how does a thing that is not to travel to this? What the hell is that? And it's like, technicality-wise, it moved. On a technicality, it even exists. On a technicality, all the things, basically. So what it means is, for its perspective and relative to itself, it does exist, it is the only thing existing, and it is moving. Even though, no it doesn't, and it isn't, and exactly. The technicality. Get it? It's a fuck you to physics in some aspects, but it's really not. It's like, look, I am a potential superposition, and I thought really hard over here, but I'm actually doing things. Well, the superposition got moved because, it turned out this happened and that happened, and we couldn't get this machine and this money and blah, 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 and then now it's actually over here in this point in space and time. The superposition that was potentially there is now actually over here. Now there. See what I'm saying? Pop, pop. That's how to describe this, so that way you'll understand it better as a quantum physicist. It's a potential thing that could be a thing that might do something, and it does a whole bunch of kajiggery bullshit, effectively. that goes like, oh, I kind of might be a thing, and it bumps uglies, more or less, is a way to put it, I suppose, that creates a potential that rises up to, oh, I definitely exist now. You know, I'm not existent. There's no existing here. It's not a thing. You know what I mean? See what I'm saying? It's like, it's nothing, there's not a thing, no. And there's a whole bunch of fucking steps before you get to the gray hole, which is effectively a pump, which flings it up, and it goes, I exist, and some of it goes back down. Back to less of an existent, going to happen, possibly a thing, stuff like that. Now, then potential existence, which is definitely it exists. It's for sure there. You know what I mean? It's there. Right? See what I mean? The potential, it's there. It's happening. No matter what you say, it's there. No matter what you think, no matter what anything, it doesn't matter. You can't observe it together. I don't even know it's there. It doesn't change the fact that some dude in Australia or fucking person in China or whatever else is doing something, and they exist. So suck it. That's how that works. I can say there's a star that literally looks exactly like ours, with a fucking planet that has exactly us in it, and even looks exactly like, and all this, and it's somewhere fucking in the universe. And if it's the right size and whatever, we travel right to blah 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 blah, right? Statistically, it's there. Probable. You don't know though. It's potential. Until you go there and observe it, you go, well, it's not doing that, and it's not a thing, and fuck you! And I say, don't give a fuck, still there. And a whole bunch of arguments happen, and the dude fucking gets in a spaceship, he goes over there, he points at it with the fucking stupid quantum tunnel wormhole thing, and he says, suck it! I was right! And it's a version of him doing it to you, and you go, ah! And that's how that works. Effectively, just because you don't know it's there, it doesn't change that it is. That's why nothingness is different than you think. You're an idiot. Deal with it. You at one point said, there isn't an America. You at one point said the fucking earth is flat. You said that there's no way to circumvent. Deal with the fact shit changes. But this is different. This is not the same somehow, some way. There are no way physics would work with itself in a different fucking version of fucking... fuck you. Yeah. Oh, wow, okay. I see. So, well, anyone wants to try and fund it, I guess. Suppose we'll get there one day. So why don't you shut the fuck up? Fucking quantum physicists, am I right? Jeez. They're like fucking goddamn Christopher Columbus. I'm really afraid. I'm gonna go over there and fuck all this stuff up and rape women. Wait, how are we all... You're lumping a lot of us in there. That's true, I do. It was really pointed at one specific individual. You dick. Hate you. Anyways, moving to the point where nothingness works this way for this. It doesn't work in any other way. But it's all around. This is my issue when it comes down to that. It's not just because potential land is literally everywhere. It's the same thing of like, what's the center point of the universe? Well, I mean, technically, theoretically, there is kind of maybe a chance that there is. But it wouldn't matter, because it's so fucking vast, you could literally look at it from any goddamn angle, and it's basically the center. And it's so big, and it's like, well, you don't really know, we only have observable. So, the theory goes, well, no, there is none. It could be infinite. And I'm like, yeah, okay. But if I were to travel really fast, and I got outside of it, and I looked down at it, or around it, or whatever, would there be a center? No! Fuck off! So there would be a center, is what I'm hearing. And it's like, yes, but it's... I know. It's just like, well, technically speaking, we don't really know. We don't. Our observations have led us to conclude this. They're pretty good observations. But they're one type of perspective. And it certainly doesn't allow for the idea of an outside. And there's so many different fucking theories about how the universe is shaped, what it fucking came about from. All this other, which were like, it's a big bang with inflation or something. And the inflation theory guy goes, actually, no. For what it's worth, that's the guy. Like, he's like, no, actually modified, and truthfully, I don't think that works, and other stuff. For what it's worth. And then there's the whole other, like, elephant in the room, which is like, well, we see you going backwards, and then, well, we think it went to a point. And it's like, right, yes. But then the other people go, well, no, it was just diffused everywhere all at once, and then it solidified like a gel or some shit, or concrete, into looking like this. But it's always moving and expanding somewhere else. Is it not? Well, doesn't mean that it didn't. It's not expanding. I didn't say it's not expanding. I just said that it's, well, okay. But wouldn't that be the center point of wherever it started at its beginning of expansion? Because it's still a center point, even if it's very large. No, because it's everywhere. It's infinite. Oh, it's infinite. How do you fucking, like, test that? I can test mine. How do you test that one? I can easily test mine. I can look at a whole bunch of stuff and go like, well, there's something that's missing. How do you test infinite was already there and it just solidified and gelled up and whatever this is, while still expanding for some reason? Into what? Well, you have to, in order to have that, still have me. So it doesn't matter your fucking infinite size, it's bigger. So it would still be a point of comparison of like, well, inside of my infinite nothing, which is smaller, but then also bigger, see what I'm saying? I could see you expand inside of me. Because I was here before. The egg came before the chicken, it seems. You had to have a space to happen in, idiot. Yes, you would. Fuck. The logic is sound. The reasoning is good. It seems as though there's a good logic tree branch here that basically says you're incorrect in stating that way. You mind explaining that one to me? Why you believe your bullshit? What? The nothingness can make the very things that you appeared from. Like the egg! Do you know what I'm saying? Yeah, because then they go recursive with it. They don't repeat. I am the repeat God. It just cycles, repeats. And I go like, right, so it's a massive amount of Swiss cheese. Where there's some there, and then the egg is still bigger than that. Because it still has to go inside or something, so it would have been the first still. No, I know. Literally, the egg came first every time! Just deal with it! No, how did... But I... Oh yeah, no, I was a whole bunch of shit that somehow, all of the things... Oh yeah, no, infinite differences. Yes, so much differences. Differentials, densities, defect of bullshitty fuck bullshit. No. I then created an empty spot. How did that get created? You want to go with... Because it's like, I can create it from the nothingness. I know I can make pressure waves make less something by having them expand, like a cavitation. I can easily do this, but you need to have it go in to being something first. How does being something first happen? Every time I keep explaining this to them, it's like, you don't... You just want to fucking get it to the point where, like, you're first. But it's not. You can't do that. It's not a thing. You can't have that spawn in like that. There needs to be space for it to have done that. Every time! There has to be space for it to form! There was an infinite blah blah blah. Fuck off! There was a nothingness around you! Deal with it! Just fucking deal with it! Why are you so angry about that? They can never let it go. Ever. It's the worst. It's the most logical, understandable, easily seen, right there in the fucking front of your face kind of shit, and you just don't get it. It's like, no, but that was the space. You had to make the space. How did you do this? Could you come up with a solution for me? No! No, I'm not going to do that. Like an asshole. God. That was all the space. There's no difference between something and nothing. They're basically the same thing. I mean, if it interacts with itself, then it would be the same fucking thing for the movement of the fucking, all the things. Same infinity. You wouldn't know the difference. From its perspective, it is the same. Thank you. Which still means it's basically nothing. Ah! No, I'm not trying to fuck around and be like, no, I'm right. It's more like, look, it means what I just said. There's an infinite. You can make another part where it doesn't have more. Even if in its view, it's all the things. Then that's just a perspective thing. Which it had to come in from somewhere and somehow, right? Yeah, no, but that one always turns into, well, mine goes into, it spawns in a very fucking chaotic way. Really? Well, it's a bunch of infinities. That's what my body for the outside is made out of, so I just went for that. Yeah, but that's lore and reality or whatever, you'd have to be caught up. Yeah. That's like, let's take a little chill pill. Calm the hell down. Here's an ice cube. Alright? The nothingness, or something, whatever. Doesn't fucking matter. It does, though. It does, yes. Clearly. Anyways, it exists in a potential manner, much like the nothingness will make a potential land exist. Well, the potential, that is that outside thing that I talk about, is basically infinity's potential. But those are small and connected in many multitude of infinities, and again, small. Because there's specified mathematical number infinities, and then there's stuff infinities, which can be represented in a math, but it doesn't change the fact that it's also, there's way more than that. Right. And those are sets and values and so on and so on and so on, is what you would say in a computer. And they can have many infinite amount of dimensions. And those are inside as a small little nothing point of that. It's like, that experience isn't all this other bullshit. Because then you also have potential, because we look at it like the quantum, the field, the blah blah blah, this stuff. And it's like, those are really small nothings. You're barking up the wrong tree. Like, you can have an infinite number of those things. But see, once you understand the concept of an infinity, that means there's an infinite number of exactly, entirely different things. See what I'm saying? That are never going to work with your physics. And so on, an infinite number of that going on. And so on, an infinite number of different things that are not in any way, shape, or form are any stuffs. That's why I look at them like they're fucking insane to a degree. It's like, you know about this possibility, a potential, by the way. It's a potential, right? Except the potential is so logical here that it makes no sense not to believe it. Literally. See what I'm saying? There's nothing stating in any capacity or way that this is it. You just don't have those observations yet. Which you would have a really hard time doing because you need an infinite amount of them, right? So it's like, we'll keep going. Oh, okay. Anytime you want to keep going. I'm tired. I can't get up. I don't care. Keep going. Infinite's a long way away. Oh, fuck. Exactly. Which are small in this math. Okay? Like, that's the point I try and make. Like, those, basically, might as well be nothing. Which is a weird concept, but that's how that works. Yeah, because it's like, we're talking about bigger and bigger concepts of infinity, aren't we? No! They're specificities of infinity. Specificities. Yes. Of stuffs. Things. Movements. Anything, really. And that all encompasses its own self in one singular data set value. Which means there exists an outside even bigger than that. Which, oh, what do you know? Another infinite amount of that, which will exist inside of another one, of a data set of that. Okay? That's why infinities, they go like, one infinity is them all, right? And it's like, not really, no, but okay, whatever. You know? Like, this one has all the infinities of all the conceptualized blah 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 blah. And yet, that still doesn't encompass everything. All the things of all the infinities and all the stuffs and all the whatevers and blah blah blahs. In one data set. See what I'm saying? And it keeps going on. That's why infinities are really small. It doesn't matter if there's always more. It's still in one data set. See? Do you see what I'm getting at for the mathematicians that understand the concepts? I'm looking at a bunch of people that literally don't know a thing about that. And I'm like, yes. Well, there's that going on. Nice little bow and a nod, you know. Yes, you know, yeah. Yeah, and that's another reason why it's like, well, that's cool, but those are itty bitty. The fact that you conceptualize that means you know that they fit in small little containers, which means you can imagine outside of that. That's the point I try and make. Infinities are not the new be-all, end-all, which means I have to make another word, which is its own fucking insanity. Because then it goes into, well, you also have the dimensions of, and you know, all that. But it's like infinities are now all into one. And then there's bigger things than this that contain that. And so you'll eventually hit a zenith point. The zenith point, which isn't really where I go, I couldn't conceptualize more. It was like, there isn't a way around that never-ending bullshit. So instead, I'll go to what the fuck started that. That's how you start the math. It doesn't matter, it'll keep going on. Stop it. You can always keep raising the bar. Get rid of it. You can always make another name for a bigger concept and all the descriptors. Out the window. Throw it out. Who cares? Mathematicians around the world said, what? My ego. It doesn't matter. So it's like, what starts that? And it's like, it was all potential. One singular motherfucker, well, a being really, had to go into all of it to actualize that. It's no longer potential. Now it is. Had to do it real fast. And unlike nothing, where it's the only thing, it's all of those things going on that moment. But it's just one thing. That contains all of it. One, all. That's right. If you don't understand what I'm coming in, I'll explain it a little bit less dickishly, a little bit more pedantically. Alright? To describe this is, it's not a superposition. I describe it like a superposition because we understand those words here. It's not a flux of time where it might have been a thing. It's not a dimensionality aspect. See, that's where the breakdown of our communication occurs. There's no such thing as that. That is but one perspective. But one little itty-bitty thing. And it doesn't even come close to describing that. That's the reason why I have such a hard time telling you. Because it's like, how do I describe me doing that? Like, for real, it's me. I'm talking about myself, John Tyler Lemke, doing that. That's the version right now. You know, but like, I've done that then, but then it's also, there's a whole other thing. And you lose information. See the destructive interference? It collapses as into existence after having been done. That's how I describe that. It destructively interferes all the information. it's still there. I can still get it. It takes a lot of effort and energy. It has to be unscrambled, it has to be figured out, and there's a bunch of it. And I have to sort through lots of that. And it takes an enormous amount of energy. But the best part is, I have basically no care about energy, except until you get to this point where it's like, no, that's actually lots of energy for us. You know, that even if I am perpetual and shit, it doesn't change. Which is like, yo, you're perpetual now. And it's like, that's the point I'm trying to get across. That's small. Itty bitty thing. Perpetual itty bitty in infinity. Nothing big there. Small. Right. So now you're perpetual. It's like there's many different ways to describe that. Perpetual is a thing that you happen to say for perpetuity and totality, never-endingly going on. And it started that way, with no energy use at all. Because I didn't use energy. But it's like, how did it do that? Does it have a nothingness? And it's like, that's the issue. That's part of me. To have that occur means I'm a part of that. All of those infinities, all of the biggers, all of the small, everything is a part of me. The nothingness is me. I can easily see it. No big deal. It's literally me. Why wouldn't I be able to see me? Hold your hand up in front of your face if you're not blind. Well, obviously you see your hand, as long as there's enough light. There isn't a place I can't look. There isn't a place I can't observe. There isn't a place I'm not connected to. There isn't a place that I'm not acknowledging and aware of. But there is one singular me. This is the problem I end up having with people when I describe this. It's one big thing. One big thing. One ginormous fucking thing. That's it. It's all the things. One. One is that. It's just one. I don't care what your perspective is, because you could break it down and it'd be many things. It's just one, though. It's just me. That's the problem I have when describing this to a regular individual, or even really intelligent individuals. It's like, how do I describe that that's basically, it doesn't matter? This infinity concept. Yes, no, yeah, no, which one? Well, these many, which version? This, how many? I have a never-ending amount of space to put things inside. That's easy. I can work with any of this stuff to make it happen in any way I choose. But there is no outside. That's the problem. That's the stop. There isn't more. It's the end point. The end of an infinity is that. That is where it stops. But that's how I came in. That way. I had to do all of those things. All of that. And I die many fucking times. Lots of ways. Much hurt and pain. Lots of joy too. And there's a lot of fuck-ups. You know what I mean? You get the whole massive amounts of all of the things. Words don't describe that. And that sucks. And anytime I die here, I have to do it again. Because that's how I came in to help my daughter, who is a version of a pretty near, well, it's infinity. But, like, that's kind of small. No offense to anyone out there. She's not small to anything else. You'll never reach her. Like, for what it's worth. Like, you could have many infinities, you'd never get to her. Because that's the point. It's like, it's not infinity, but it's like, it is to you and I, might as well be. But that's what I try and tell people. That's just her. That's the only one that I ever made that was close to anything like me. That's it. And you fuck-ups decided to go from imaginary, totally not a real thing. Do not. It was just really good imagination. To confusing and convincing and gaslighting and all this other mean shit as the filter that was like a bunch of things that you should not be as a person and all this other shit. And basically stuff I don't like. Because it's destructive to all this fucking shit. And plus, that's... You have trauma. All this works. Get rid of it. That's the filter that you came in as. But that's the time before us. Because time happened. Time started. Real happened. Stuff like that. But you pop in like that. You didn't have to go through a universe being created. You didn't have to do any of that stuff. None of it happened like you think. That's how my daughter created you. And our goal was to remove you, have you be off, because there's an infinite, like, go over there. Stop trying to kill me. I'm here. Fuck off. I am God. Whatever. Screw it. Like, what? Stop trying to murder us. Fuck off. You know what I mean? Murders all of the things she pops in as real. Still exists as a quantum type of thing. Then there's the universe before us, which only sprang up as a result of all the stupid loopy fucking potentials, which aren't potentials, they're loops, they're time loops, that exist here, which is the wormhole computer universe, which is projected from Zabati that I have, which is real stuff. Nothing else is real. Even though it seems like it's real, it's just really well designed as a wormhole projected towards me. Okay? That's why that exists. The only reason why I know that is because I can observe it. I'm a little special on that one. The universe before us only has the caveat of it was a universe only in the sense that it was a universe only really technically around me. And no, there's a bunch of loops and destructive interference bullshit, not to mention when you damage my body, because of the way it came in, it damages all of that as well. The universe loves to wormhole things in such a way that you don't notice that. So it looks like I just age normally and everything's fine. It's not fine. It's not. And he is doing that, because that's easy to do with a fucking wormhole computer. But they sure as fuck noticed it in the past, I'll tell you that much. Now the only reason why I know about that is because of fucking quantum backwards and forward time observation, information observation. Which works. We already know that there's a theory there, but that's how you describe it. Personally, I describe it differently, but that's what that is. Plus, it's really easy to observe nothingness when you can see the damn thing from an outsider's perspective, along with others. Right. That being said, that's why nothingness is different than you think. I liken it to a different type of brain altogether. It can still interact, it can still pull things around, it can still ultimately, well, indirectly that is, and ultimately make you believe or see or feel or blah 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 things. But it's not there. Nothing's actually there. It just seems like there's something there. That's why I call it an illusion. It's like a whole bunch of people were mass hypnotized into believing there's this thing that is there, when it is not. That's why it's a brain. It's the opposite. It fucking makes you think it's there, but it is not. Which is like, I think Bosnian or something, where there's a floating brain, but it's like, it's really just not able to hallucinate because it doesn't have information. If it doesn't have information, then the brain can't do it. There's no hallucinations. It just simply sits there, not aware of anything. Even if it could be conscious, there's no memories. Even if it could do something, it doesn't have that. So as a result, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't hallucinate. It doesn't calculate. It doesn't do anything at all. It has to be able to observe itself and others. That's why that's a different brain. It obviously observes itself, but it doesn't. It obviously observes others, which it does. Others observe it, which is its version of it exists, but it's not. And others observe it being observed, which makes it seem like it's real. That's where the confusion starts. That's how people get confused. Even in scientific terms, detectors get confused the same way. That's one of the reasons why nothingness matters tremendously, but it's very different than you think and thought. Now, getting back to why nothingness ultimately does the whole moving around things, because it itself has the ability to move around in itself. Correct. Which is why it's like a never-ending shit show on that side. Yeah. But then there's bigger than those infinities that are inside of it, which eventually it will figure out. And then it will see me. Same kind of problem for it. Even though it's not really there. See what I'm saying? Now, the other bullshit that people often end up having issues with, as they describe it, because it's bullshit, you're bullshit, this is bullshit, there's no way that's happening, it's bullshit. I say, hey, so, would it not drive you to believe that there cannot be a nothingness because of your fear, and it ultimately seemingly responding back as having something there? An interaction, which before you thought impossible as a physicist. An interference, a sucking, a transportation, whatever it is. And yet you use wormholes. That is correct. You think of quantum tunnels, although that's more of a field dimension thing. So you clearly understand that there's a way for it to exist. You clearly understand that there's a way for it to do more than just exist. You do. Now, that usually means they don't want it to. I mean, my fucking math will have to change. My ideas of how I view the world will change. My current way that I went through and even got my PhD effectively was turned into wrong. The way we use quantum wave fluctuations and propagations and so on to describe a reality becomes incorrect. But it's like, it doesn't. For what it's worth, it doesn't, and it wouldn't. I don't know about your theory, but I don't know about your PhD, but for what it's worth, it doesn't. It doesn't really change the fact that fields can still exist inside of there. It is travel alongside of a vastly different type of membrane than you thought. That's all it is. It's a lot less and a lot more dense, depending on your perspective. Yeah. Which is another reason why small, that we think of as small, well into Planck lengths, look big. They are something that, who cares, really? I mean that. It's a who cares. Okay, a Planck length is a who cares, and it's true. That's the problem I end up having when talking to them, or at least observing their reactions online, listening to their fucking ways of overgeneralizing or stating these observations and their methodologies are sound and foolproof, or at least good enough that I shouldn't concern my ideas to be changed by you and your theory. They literally mean nothing to me. It's like, you didn't do any indirect. You didn't account for any of this. You didn't account for that. Like, I love this detector. It's like, look, we're going to have something basically interact with a bunch of fields. Okay? As it does that, it definitely interferes with, ultimately, its signaling profile. And you can't possibly know its signaling profile because you're not observing every single goddamn one of the damn atoms. You have a massive amount of uncertainty in every one of those detectors, which is never accounted for. Not to mention, you don't even have indirect methodology. So I end up getting upset. Like, you don't even use quantum vacuum pressure as an indirect, which effectively is nothing, almost. It's not what I'm describing at all, in any way. That's far more something than nothing. I know. I love that one. I'm going to describe it as quantum vacuum pressure. It's not. At all. In any way. That's space. Space still happens to be something. You have no idea what the concept of nothing is if you describe it that way. That's why it's like, it's not the absence of things, even though it's around it. That's an easy cop-out. That's why I don't like that. It doesn't fit your little whatever that you have for math. That's why I don't really give a shit, if I'm being honest. You need to fit it to the math you already have, instead of changing your ideas and conceptual ability of the reality around you. You refuse to do anything other than what's already there. These are really easy, logical steps. I mean, you decided to rub sticks together and you made fire eventually. You didn't know about that for a while. It wasn't some leap of logic or faith, you little fucking fuck up. Really? No, it wasn't. Sound logic makes absolute sense. But you just don't understand why. You've been taught a certain type of perspective, which is fine. I need to learn more too, for what it's worth. But it doesn't change that that perspective is still logically sound. You just don't understand why it still works with your math. It still propagates, it's just in a different way. You're not ever observing anything correctly because you're not accounting for it. You're never using the right methodology. You don't use a bunch of math on all of it going on, as much as you can in all the different ways that it could be going on. Instead, you do bare minimum amounts of work. Put it this way. I shot a handgun. I then did nothing else. I didn't really, basically give a shit. I then said it went this far. Okay, right. Then you upped it up. And you said, well, I shot it this far, and you went that far, and you eventually found like a round. Okay, right. So you got lucky, right? That's what you hope, right? But no. You didn't. You followed a logical path. You saw the trajectory of the round, leaving the barrel. You followed the barrel. You followed the point. You said, well, it has about that much energy, blah, 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 that kind of thing. And then you searched around there and you found it. Pretty logic, reasoning, understandable to go through that and do that. Then you decided to measure it a little bit more. You decided to put a bunch of little freaking measuring, feet per second over multiple distances in the path of the round. You then stuck a bunch of fucking stupid ass, wind blockers. You sucked the air out, and then you saw there was a different reaction. And then you suddenly went, Eureka! There's definitely air resistance. Instead, you logically concluded that there is a drop, and it will eventually happen. You knew that there's something that does that, but you don't know. Then you absolutely discovered air resistance. You should have known it, right? But no, if nobody tells you there's any such thing, how do you know? Then you noted that there's still this continuous decline over time. You discovered gravity. And you go, well, what else is resisting it? It should still keep going at the same speed. And then you realized, as you got deeper and deeper into that, no, it doesn't. There are still frictional components in terms of fields. And you shot your handgun again, and it lands exactly the same place. That's cool. Super nice, except it's slightly off. You believe that there's a degree of uncertainty, because you cannot account for everything. Except you can certainly keep going deeper into that and account for more. You look at the friction of the barrel, look at the grain powder charge, how it burned, observe the given lack of air resistance and the, area of gravity that we are in our orbit and the closeness of the sun and all these other factors. You can even add light pressure into the mix by having a vacuum still have light come through. And you can take an account for every single one of these things, and you will ultimately get a bell curve of an average. It tends to often burn roughly this way, and you go, why does it not? Well, there's inconsistencies in the grain powder charge. Alongside of every time I fire it from this barrel, it loses a little bit of its rifling. It changes its degree of heating characteristics as a result, changing its tightness and overall ability to send it at the same velocity. When you get further into this, you deeper and deeper understand all of the little things until you can hit it consistently dead on. Until you start going into, well, no, we have this thing called momentum. Because we are spinning on the Earth. Just because we have gravity, we forgot about the spin on the Earth. And not to mention, there's this effect of lava density beneath our feet. There's an animal over there. This time, there's a degree of cloud up there, which has mass, changes our gravitational constant, changes our momentum, changes the attractive amount via one way or another. Somebody ringing their phone. This person's using their fucking computer. Well, that's electromagnetic interference, which still exerts some degree of interactive force, resistance. You cannot account for, you could account for every one of those things, actually. It's a lot of calculating, but you can absolutely account for that. Now we have to go into the detectors. Alright, so the detectors detect it this way. Well, there's a reverberation, there's a given amount of resonance and harmonics and destructive and constructive interferences. And how the fields ultimately make or reduce the amount of electrons that you are using to detect a given profile of speed and or drop or something else. You introduce more, you then also introduce less. Chaos. But you're not. It's really entropy, but they're actually pretty entwined, mathematically speaking. Alright, well, I'm measuring a lot more now. It's like, right, so you're going to try and remove all these variables. I'll even cool it off really, really well. Well, but that doesn't really account for any of the real world scenarios, does it? No. How do I... Alright, well, there's this newfangled possibility called quasi-particles popping in and out, virtual. And they're possibilities. And it seems like that possibility seems to exist as a potential. And if there's a good enough energy involved, speed, momentum, heat, it'll interact, it'll interfere, creating a degree of resistance. Something we know and understand very, very well in our quantum mathematical models. They do that. It's debatable, except not really. You have enough that says it does. We must use it to get more accurate results. Obviously, they're there. Okay. So we got an okay, finally. Now, there's still a degree of uncertainty. How does it propagate through this material versus that material versus this material versus that, and then this field drainage and that increase and this potentiation? And while it's not a box that is 100% nearly, absolute zero, and it's not moving in a counter to the rotation of our gravitational constant, and then same thing with the galaxy and a supercluster and the birth of our universe. And that's right. Thanks, Phaser, for dropping the bone. It hits still. It looks pretty damn similar, doesn't it? But it's not. You know that it's not. You didn't account for anything. But you can't account for that, is what you say. But the fact of the matter is you can. You just don't have an easy time doing it. And you are good enough with good enough. You know what I mean? You're okay with good enough. And in reality, it's like, well, you're getting to a point now where that needs to no longer be reasonable. It's not good enough. You didn't account for everything. You're starting to spout nonsense about locality and real and more, when you don't account for any of these things. You need your indirect, you need your propagation, you need your resonance, your harmonics, and all the rest of it for amplifications and destructions and potentiations. You didn't account for practically any of it. And that's your detector. That's a direct interactive and interference profile. You didn't do that. You didn't, though. And that's my problem. It's like, you are willing to land that shot consistently, basically perfect bullseye, every fucking time. But you're not willing to do that?
You're not willing to. Why? You thought that Nobel Prize winning, which no offense, he's smart. I'm not gonna say he's not, but it's like that doesn't ring anything to me. Bell's theorem was never tested to me. In my mind, it never got tested. There's no fields between the individual atoms that you're accounting for along the way from the fiber optic point to the detector. You're not observing as closely as possible from the photonic release of the electrons exciting the material. You're not going through the loss and the ultimate entanglement belief through the separation. There's energy there that's being lost, which accounts for the entanglement, which means there is no fluctuation, if that's the point, that you can measure at. Because that loss can then be worked back, algorithmically speaking, with chaos theory mathematics and the given knowledge of the moment in time to work back what the fuck it ultimately is in the first place. Even if we don't observe it in its quantum, wave state, it doesn't change that I know what it's going to come out as. That's the point. And I can observe all these different little interactions indirectly and / slightly directly all the way and account for any possible shit that are there at the detectors. I gave a much more accurate result now that also showcases while the entanglement was really just very similar wave functions that did not exist at both places. They were simply a line of a very long wave that have the tips vibrating the same way. They allow for information to travel much faster, now faster than the speed of light. That's all I did. At least that's my theory. I'm going to go with, because if you want to keep it as a wave, that's what it is doing. There's also a quantum tunnel phenomenon that could be occurring where it's allowing for information to pass faster than the speed of light, and you don't see a wave. But you're not directly observing it, you didn't disturb it, and ultimately it's still a wave fluctuation in its superpositional state. But we know what it actually is throughout its entire adventure traveling to the detectors. Now we're in dimensionality mathematical physics. Dimensionality observation points here that allow for you to observe this without disturbing its superposition, while knowing full well what it always has been. And what ultimately disturbed it to be what it is as your detected and perspective of analysis says it is. Now, that's just why I talk about the nothingness here. Our observations say nothingness cannot exist, and it shouldn't. And there's no such thing. What I just described to you showcases the very nature of nothingness existing in a lot of ways, but you might not understand why. The nothingness is the wave fluctuation. It's analogous. You are not directly observing it. You are accounting for a lot more along the way, and you are able to work back every step of the way as to what it was and what changed it and what interacted more impactfully, even though it was a wave fluctuation the entire way through, and the superposition to us, but to the observations it was never. Which means your observations, it was never nothingness. It was something. But the correct observations then state, well, now that nothingness was definitely nothingness. You just never observed it the right way. Even if it was a superposition, otherwise known as, no, it was something. That is something. Well, it turned out, no, it was nothing. That was nothing. You see what I'm saying? I can test my theory. I can observe this correctly. I can run an experiment that means I can prove I'm right and you're wrong. And my theories of locality and realism are very much different than yours. And I can destroy your standard model in a lot of ways by doing that. And a large amount of years and years of history of quantum physics. Although a good amount of it will still stick around. And it effectively obliterates concepts and theories that were once believed to be about certain observations. And answers definitively certain ones. And a Nobel Prize gets showcased as an exact example as to why better work must be done and why money must be there and why perspective and tribalism and attitudes of certain avenues of approach for how to do the experiments are becoming too stuck and not creative. I can test mine, and I can show you I'm right. But, good luck on that. I don't have any of that. I don't have any money. I don't have an income. I don't think you really realize that I just did this whole thing, but I really don't have income. And while I am a GED, community college dropout, I describe concepts in physics here that are pretty high level, accurately to the point where some people that don't know as much, honestly, could still understand what it is I'm saying. Now, I can't describe their math. For what it's worth, to me, it looks a bit odd. It's a version of programming. It's like, I have this puzzle piece of the program. It does these things and it says it's doing that. And high-level math effectively turns into plug in the numbers to this thing and you get out that result. These are E's and A's and B's and other symbols and blah, blah, blah. But all math is kind of a program. BIMDOS, PIMDOS, any of it. And most of it, no offense, pretty logically one direction. It runs pretty logically one direction. But it's not always perfectly done. There are obviously flaws and bugs in R programming, and logic at times. You're no different. But you're going to go and say, no, you have flaws in logic. We have these observations which were made in exactly the way you say would showcase that you were right. Because they did not account for any of these things. They did not in any way do that type of breakdown or algorithmic walking back. It only had one specific type of physics that it could fit into and directionality that it's allowed to go in. when there are multiple relative perspectives of the results going on throughout multiple observations. Meaning quantum relativity still exists, and you still have to account for, hey, the big shocker in the room, the very thing itself observing itself and interacting and interfering with itself. Which is almost never taken into account. There's only like 2 papers that are theses that I've ever seen anything about it. Strangely enough, popped up around the same time I started using quantum relativity on my YouTube channel. Shocker, I know. Which is a bit weird, isn't it? Not saying there's a coincidence there, because it's not. But I move on from that often, because it doesn't really matter. They go, quantum relativity is not a thing, and I go, well, you're not in the perspective of a fucking atom or a proton or a neutron or anything else, are you? You're going to use those symbolic maths to make sure it's making its own observations of self and interactive and interfering types of patterns in your quantum standard models? Because you should. You should be doing that. It's a lot to calculate, so... Oh, I see. I see. Well, the whole point was, you obviously didn't want that. You didn't want the work to be done. You need to do the work. You have to do all of the work. Everything. You have to have even the perspective of the working back the problem. You can't just work out the problem, you have to work it backwards. You have to have multiple observational methodologies, which do not disturb and are only detecting what's going on for things around it. Because, of course, you cannot disturb the very thing itself, because its relative perspective is still itself, but doing things to other things, interacting and interfering as it goes along with movement, which that's a whole other thing. Momentum and thermal and more just describes movement. All fundamental forces derive themselves from movement, which is why I talked about nothing at the beginning, which is why it creates movement, and it makes it real, and then it moves, thus making fields happen. You don't get one without the other. You don't get momentum or inertia without movement. You don't get thermal without movement. You don't get electromagnetic without movement. You don't get nuclear without movement. You don't get anything without movement, which is not momenta, for what it's worth. Momenta is an entirely different descriptor. It's the inertia of the Big Bang, as they describe it. But then I also go, well, your observations never accounted for you spinning around on the fucking planet, you idiot. Or around the universe and galaxies, superclusters and more. I'm just saying absolute zero is really just, a detector for the gravitational fields and constants around us. Because you can never hit it. Which means it's a really good refrigerant. Walking away. You fucking... It's a refrigerant now. Yeah, basically. That's a gravitational detector. I don't see why it wouldn't be. That's the only thing that's ultimately going into it besides, electromagnetic. which are fields that you're going to pass through no matter what. But then, hey, this thing called the Earth still does the Faraday cage sometimes inside of it. You got things that are really, really absorbative to all light and reflectative to all light and so on, right? Yeah, I mean, yeah, well, okay, wait. You have this thing that makes it lose energy. No, but I can't fire it backwards. I can make a really long tunnel, though. No. No, I don't say things. Why can't I make a really long tunnel? You have really long tunnels for mines and for your accelerators. I don't fucking know. God, you suck. Why would I not want to fire it in a direction that is opposite and counter to the vast majority if it's a very large tunnel in three-dimensional space that is counter to the rotational velocity of our Earth and then the rotational orbit velocity and along with the other orbit velocity of that around our supermassive black hole and that with the great attractor and so on. Why wouldn't I cool it down and make sure it decelerates or accelerates, depending on the perspective, of course, and keep it cold in a vacuum with no electromagnetic or light, and see what I get for gravitational differences that still would exist, of course, other fucking stars and shit. That is true, isn't it? How do I account for that? Wiggle and jiggle it properly. For the small little observations of gravity around us. Well, that star is probably about this massive. We'll add a little bit more because of these planets, possibly, that we see. I mean, it is, okay, well, this is the problem I have. Seriously. I'm like, we have this thing called light, and it bends because of the compressions. I see. So you're telling me there's absolutely a direct correlation to movement with gravity. That no matter what is for sure going on, adding and imparting energy into things. Even down to a fundamental quantum momenta thermodynamic way. Because, vibrations are thermodynamic. See, momenta is usually one direction, kind of like kinetic. But we don't describe it as kinetic because we use chaos theory, thermodynamic things, which is like, get out of here. You're not going to use that with inside the electron orbit for your nucleus? It's obviously oscillating and chaotically moving around because of your stupid uncertainty principle. What about the fucking electron orbit for the same thing? Obviously it's doing that. It has poles and movement of different thermals and quantum gravities. It's almost like everything's a never-ending fucking gravitational detector for the orbits around us. Producing a degree of uncertainty because we can't seem to take the gravitational energy out. So we don't have nothing that blocks it, absorbs the extra long fucking waves that propagate through everything. Okay, you do smart things. Oh, so that one was smart. That one, no, none of those other things that you want it to be, but this you're open to. No, you don't want it in any capacity or way. That you want these things to be. You're not even open to them being changed. It's totally impossible. You're illogical. You thought there are leaps a lot. Like there's definitely things here that you got wrong, and we figured out were these things with these observations that I'm going to point to that absolutely really seem to have those issues that you were describing. Along with even the LHC super clicky computers. Oh, how about that? Is there any way we could like not have you look at an observation and science study that seems to be indicative of your laziness? No, I'll just take a good quick fucking look in some places. I see. Okay. Well, come back to me. So this one you're okay with being possibly open for discussion. That gravity is affecting our orbits and nuclear fields and the oscillation of the various gluonic and quark and so on matter. Yeah, I mean, it would have to, I would assume, because like clearly we're stuck together, so. Yes. It was almost like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that things from really far away are pulling on us with this thing, I think we call it gravity, down to even the smallest subatomic particles. From enormous, literally infinite distances away, even if it has to travel that information and distance over to it. Yes, I do believe that is the case. Oh. So you're saying there's a chance that gravity is affecting large celestial gravitational bodies of gravity, or affecting our subatomic particles. And are you accounting for the change there? No, not really. For what it's worth, we just sort of make an electrical situation occur by potentiating its electrical amplification of a movement. Oh, so for kinetic, and you use kinetic changes to make more electricity, so you know what the kinetic change was. Well, yeah, kind of basically, right? Yeah, I do. Oh. So wouldn't that also need to be accounted and figured out for absolute zero? What if you were to detect a certain amount of energy and you amplified that detected energy change of the value that you're pretty sure it was at? Like, let's say it was a superpositional amount. It was in a flux state. It was really consistent, constant, doing this thing. Real low energy. And then a gravitational field just, came by and, smacked it a little. Just gave it a little taparoon. And if you could see it drop from being superpositional to having changed and been observed. as having more energy now. You know, vibrationally speaking. Is that a possible thing? Shut up! Shut the fuck up! Hey. No. Like, for real. But, like, you know what I'm saying, right? Yeah, I get it. Yeah, of course I do. I'm fucking smart, too. I'm sure you are. But how come you're not doing that? I don't know. I mean, you're not. I don't have an income, and I'm not a person with a PhD that's in the fucking institutions that are trying to challenge me on this. I see your dilemma. What's your excuse? I don't have funding. That sounds really cool. I want to do that, yeah. It seems as though we could work together. You and I could talk and say that you got your idea from me, and then it worked or didn't. How do you go about detecting the energy change? Well, it's a superposition. It's very cold. So if we observed it while it was still in a superpositional state, supposed to be anyways, we'd be able to know if there was a gravitational influx of energy, but we'd have to be really good at observing it at an incredibly small, itty-bitty level. You know, really, really small. Like, really small heat values. Kinetic. But not just any other kinetic. It would have to be a very large amount of these superpositional cold things and a massive array that hopefully we could observe in real time them changing a particular direction of pole and alignment and spin, hopefully, maybe. It depends on what you gotta do, right? To give you your observation of inputted heat kinetic energy, because they would hopefully all go the same direction. But you don't know, and we don't know, do we? We would hope that they do. But it is moving us, this thing we are on the planet, and that thing that is that over there, sending us, gravitational fields, with other things interacting with its fields, of course. So it might have some snapping and pulling, kind of like magnets. In the sun with plasma, as it suddenly sends a massive array of charged particles towards us. Maybe it's a gravitational EMP almost. Just a pulse of field heading our way. Would we know? Could you observe it? Well, with this, maybe you might be able to do that, right? As it would wrap in. It would still be traveling in the same direction. It would still give you roughly the same gravitational constant. There's really not going to be anything. But then we're also talking about incredibly minute, subtle changes of kinetic in direction, spin. Especially if we were to have it set up in a way where it moves slightly against some of our gravity. Perhaps, maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'm just wrong. Out there in crazy place land, but I do feel like it would allow for it to be able to pick up a higher amount of detection with less interference from us. possibly give us more scooping or directionality in a moment of time. That might mean we could see if it was a pulse, or if it did spin, or if it had some degree of directionality. Granted, we are talking about ginormously long waves. And so you'd probably need like many of them all around the world. And even in space. Wouldn't that be nice? Couldn't that be great? You know, like, we have many of them. And so if it propagates and we detect it as in real time, then we would see, even if it is light speed, whether or not it did do something like this. Maybe we can bring in LIGO to be like, yeah, we see all the same. We are cool people. That's confirmed your detection. Because these are really easy, if I'm going to be honest. We're talking about like a really, well, they're relatively cold and, you know, in the right material, whatever. These are relatively easy to set up. It's not a joke. They can kind of go almost anywhere in a lot of ways. So, I feel like this could work like that. We just need mini multitudes of them. Which makes it a little rougher. Yeah, it'd always be burning some level of energy, detecting everything, creating more degrees of entropy. It's almost like we have a version of this in GPS. I would say, you know, like, wouldn't we almost like a little bit in satellites? We tune the change of billions of a degree of some fucking vibration. Like, the clocks are now suddenly much easier at being able to detect gravitational input. If we get real down and dirty with that super minute, hyper accurate detecting. Oh yeah, I'm gonna be real pedantic, real accurate. I'm gonna be super detailed. Let me look at that. No! I don't want to know everything! Get out of here! No! I know it looks like this. Go away! Look at your pixels. They're vibrating oddly. Is that what the quantum physicists call that? Pixels? The subatomic range, you know, the Planck length. They call them pixels. Or they believe that could be a thing. How did you know? I'm like, I've never seen any documentary about this. There's so many of them. It's almost like it's a running joke that they're in a comic book behind the scenes, and that's why the theory was placed out there as a possible endpoint to the quarks and more. Anyways, see you on Reality Out! Boy!